Hello chess friends and welcome to Yazard of Chess channel and welcome back to our Queen's Gambit Declined studies. So in these studies we have covered some great openings and great defenses like the Qigong defense, Tadash defense. We have seen the beautiful Harvard's attack, and today we're continuing with our mini series about the Queen's Gambit Declined exchange variation. The exchange variation we have started recently with our positional setup with this f3 e4 preparation. I'll explain of course also in this video what's all about if you are maybe following for the first time one of my videos. This f3 e4 setup in the exchange variation creates already dynamic play here for white. White is getting this central pawn storm. Of course, black is also some counter play opportunities. The counter play opportunities we have explained also in our mini series. So in my previous video, for instance, we have covered a beautiful gameplay by Stockfish where Stockfish destroyed really this after e4 setup. But today we'll see how actually Stockfish is playing this after e4 setup. It's a little bit different when Stockfish is playing the game. You know, probably you're expecting some wild tactics. I can promise you again, this will be a beautiful sharp tactical battle where Stockfish creates really some dynamic ideas in a seemingly positional opening like this. Really wild stuff how the game went on, and this will be unfortunately our last video in this after e4 setup. In the continuation of our Queen's Gambit Declined exchange variation, we'll do also some other approaches, but don't worry so much. If you have followed maybe my channel, I cover also some tournaments that are going on, and maybe if a game happens with this f3 e4 setup, then we'll analyze it and of course add it into your playlist. So this series will be always updated sort of when maybe a top grandmaster like Magnus Carlsen, maybe Raman Rupragananda I've seen recently play this beautiful opening with the white pieces. So when maybe this opening again happens, we'll analyze the game and then we'll add it simply into our playlist where maybe black is winning the game, or maybe white is winning the game, or maybe when the game ends in a draw. So let's see now how the brutal Stockfish engine plays now this beautiful after e4 setup with the white pieces. Be prepared, this is again chess from another dimension. Its opponent was Arasan, maybe not this elite top engine, but still a respected engine around 3200 rating points. So let's see now how here they play the game. So Stockfish opened with the move d4. We have d5 by Arasan, c4, e6, the Queen's Gambit Declined, knight to c3, knight to f6, and after c takes d5, e takes d5, we have now the exchange variation. Bishop to g5 positional line, we have talked about these ideas. Let's talk about it again. If bishop to e7 happens, this is a good, of course, play by black. Black continues with a good protection around the square f6 and has now also here the protection of the d5 square. Of course, you see many times if you play bishop to d6, bishop to f6, and knight to d5 is going to happen. So you have to play either bishop to e7 or here also a nice defensive move like c6. c6 is also working, does the same thing, protects simply the d5 pawn. So in the game, Arasan played bishop to e7, e3, we have h6, bishop to h4, c6. So this position has been analyzed many times now in our mini series about the Queen's Gambit Declined exchange variation. Bishop to d3, again I'm pointing out we are delaying the knight move. We are not playing with this knight on g1. We don't want to play knight to f3. We want to play knight to e2, and then, as I said in the beginning of our video here, f3 e4 is the main breakthrough motif. f3 e4 is our central breakthrough idea. This is now the most important concept of this setup of white. So in the continuation, kingside castling, knight to e2, we have now b5, and we have talked about this idea b5. This is really, I think, must play here by black. Black should play really the game like this, because if, for instance, white in some occasions plays a3 b4, we have talked about these ideas, but let's repeat it again. If white makes maybe a positional mistake like a3 b4, then many times this knight will come to d6, or maybe even this knight, it doesn't matter, but one of these knights will eventually come here to c4. So the positional idea about this b5 progress, and the game that we have covered recently, which Stockfish won with the black pieces, also Stockfish played with the black pieces the move b5. So as I said, we want to reroute the knight on c4. That's why white needs to be careful. White should never now in this particular position advance the pawn on b4. Maybe in some occasions, if you have some tactical calculations, if you maybe have a sort of checkmate pattern or something, maybe then b4 is working. But as a positional move, I think you could lose really the game just because of one pawn move. So be careful of what you're doing now on the queen side. Many of us, I think, would try to stop this progress with a3 b4 and similar stuff, but this is not working, because even if you try some ideas of rook to c1, continuing the pressure around this backward pawn on c6, which makes sense really in the beginning. We have seen also by Stockfish in the previous game that we have analyzed in the series, also protected just the pawn on with the move bishop to b7. As I said, maybe this bishop on b7 is not the optimal piece. It's maybe not the best bishop in the world, but at least it's protecting so far the light square bishop, and now the knight wants to be rerouted here to c4. So be careful, as I said. So here the continuation, rook to c1 was played by Stockfish. Stockfish immediately targets here the backward pawn on c6. We have now a5. Here the engine Arasan makes further progress on the queen side, and now a very nice, subtle, beautiful positional move by Stockfish 15 a4. Notice that Stockfish did not play b4, although of course b4 was never possible, but sometimes you want to play this move b4. Stockfish plays the move a4, leaves still the flexibility to play b3, because as we said, knight to d7, knight to b6, knight to c4 is then the positional idea to reroute the knight and get it on c4. So that's why with the move a4, okay, you have exposed yourself a little bit on the king side, but still you are flexible with the move b3. So even if knight to c4 happens, still you have a good defensive setup with a potential b3 move. Here Arasan continues with b4. We have knight to b1. Okay, Stockfish is saying you had your fun with your queenside attack, but look at this now this is an open c file. I will attack your c6 pawn, and also what we have talked about many times, and also if you have followed maybe my chat channel, we have created this minority attack ideas many times. The c5 square is also something that we want to attack. So actually now white wants to reroute the knight on d7, b6, and then occupy here the weak c5 square. This is brilliant play by Stockfish. So Stockfish stopped now the pawn progress here on the queen side, and creates now here, first of all, a weak pawn on c6, but also a weak square on c5. Really nice positional game here by Stockfish 15. Bishop to b7. You have to protect now, as we said, the pawn on c6. Maybe you want to still play ideas, knight to d7, knight to b6, knight to c4, but look at this. This square is suddenly now twice covered by the light square bishop, but also by the rook on c1. So we have knight to d2. Stockfish makes further progress, knight to b3, knight to c5, rook to e8, kingside castling, knight to d7, queen to c2. Stockfish is again not allowing the move c5. Look at this. If c5 happens, this bishop or this knight will be simply too overloaded. Maybe the c5 makes in the beginning really sense because you're creating a breakthrough and you're maybe improving your backward pawn. We had really the backward pawn on c6, but this is not working because white will simply continue with bishop to f6, and now one of these pieces is deflected from the defense of the c5. Will just continue like this. Knight to b3 is going to happen, and we'll have, I think, a great protection around the square c5. So we are having here an extra pawn, and also in the near future we can play sort of a blockade idea against the isolated pawn. We have talked about many times the problems when your opponent is left with an isolated pawn. Then you should play a blockade in front of that pawn, so you should fix the position. So now obviously we want to of course improve simply the position around the square d4. And look at this, when you play the move knight to b3, not that this move is only protecting the pawn on c5, we have also a great protection of the d4 square. So this is not working. So you see the seemingly dynamic move c5 in this particular position is not working because the knight is a little bit here, the knight on d7, or maybe even the bishop. If you of course take out here like this, you can also take out with the bishop, it doesn't matter, or with the knight the same position will happen, nothing dramatically changed. Actually you would be forced maybe even to take out with the pawn just in order to stay active here around the square c5. But again, with bishop to b5 we're continuing simply the pressure. Look at this, very wild stuff. Even if you try now to improve your pawn with c4, look at this, good queen is coming into the game, queen to f5, you're getting devastating. Maybe you can protect this position, but now for instance this pawn is hanging. So really this position can collapse in a couple of moves if you don't play the move order correctly. So see, as I said, c5, I think we have to solve the problems about c5, because c5 is black's main goal. If black manages to do this in a good way, then you could be lost here, because black continues then with this dynamic space advantage on the queen side. So this is a move that you should not allow. So that's why after move queen to c2, look at this again, knight to b3. Maybe I'm repeating myself a little bit too much, but as I said, we're simply fixing. We are not allowing here the pawn on c5. If that happens, happens, it's a bad game here for white. So queen to c7. Look how also this Arasan engine is trying finally to play the move c5, knight to b3, not allowing this scenario, bishop to f8, rook from f to d1, and now bishop g6, pardon me, trying bishop to g7, maybe c5, and then to create a dynamic fianchetto bishop, which could maybe cause some tactical damage on this diagonal. So we have now h3, we have queen to d8, bishop to g6 is not working here. If you're asking yourself the question, in my opinion, many of us would try this tactical shot. I myself would probably try it maybe in a blitz bullet game for sure, but actually it's not working because, okay, you had your fun, you took some pawns, you created some checks, maybe you can even undermine a little bit the defense of the knight on f6, but look at this, you have only the queen that's attacking. Okay, probably we'll have your fun also around the square c5, but now probably black can reroute the bishop, will include it into the game, maybe with queen to f7, simplify the game, trading off the queens. When the queens are off the board, then the attack is splashed. So this is not working. So g6 was played by Arasan. Stockfish continues with h3, queen to d8, rook to e1, king to h8, and now queen to d1. Stockfish is saying, I don't have to play another blockade move here on the square c6, on the square c5, pardon me, because the queen has left also now finally the c file. So we have king to g8, queen to c2, a couple of perpetuals, and after queen to d2, Arasan tried this move knight to e4, simplify the game by trading off the queen. So in my opinion, in many occasions this would be a good move, but not in this particular position where obviously white has still this c file attack and black has here the weakness on c6 and c5. Okay, in many occasions this knight to e4 is a defensive idea, is a simplification idea, and we have talked about really in our mini series many times about this move knight to e4. When that is possible in a better way, you should do it, but not in this particular position, I think, here, because Stockfish simplifies the game. Bishop to d8, knight to d2, knight to d2, rook takes d8, knight to b3 again simple blockade here around the square c5, not allowing ever this c5 to be played. So although the queens are off the board, the position is much more simplified, but I'm not seeing good ways how black should make further progress here in this position. So here we have bishop to d6, a beautiful move now by Stockfish 15. Now knight to f4, bishop to f4, it wouldn't be good here. E takes f4 would happen now, and now if you maybe try even to trade off the bishops, we can do so. Bishop to a6, rook to a6. Notice nothing dramatically changed in the position. Still you have a weak pawn now on a5, the weak pawn on c6, the weak square on c5, and now we just play here rook to e7. We're dynamic here on the 7th rank. Now there are even some threats of rook to d7, rook to d7, knight to c5, picking up maybe some material here and still continuing the game against the backward pawn on c6. So you see here the bishop to f4 move doesn't make sense, and actually your dark square bishop is quite a good piece, controls both of the diagonals. Maybe you still have chances maybe in the later stage finally to play the move c5. So that's why here knight to b6. Now Arasan plays on this idea, knight to c4, because what Arasan sends here after rook to c2 and bishop to c8, we have here now a rook to a1. Knight to a4 wouldn't be good here immediately, because again you get rook to a1, you have to step back, and now we just pick up the pawn on a5 here, rook to a5, knight to a5, the bishop is hanging, you have to step back, and now again the c6 is weak. So that's why after rook to c2, bishop to c8 was played, rook to a1, and now Arasan, as we said in the beginning, we wanted to play this idea, knight to c7, knight to b6, knight to c4. Mission accomplished. Actually, when you think about this position harder, bishop to c4 immediately is not working because of d takes c4, rook to c4, bishop takes f4, e takes f4, and now look at this, bishop to e6. You're suddenly getting destroyed on this long diagonal. You have to step back with your rook, and maybe you can also take out the pawn here, but your knight is lost. That's now the main issue here. So Arasan played here really also a solid game, managed to finally, as we said, fix the knight on c4, but now Stockfish noticed, of course, that this knight is loose on f4, and he's trying now actually to play the move e4. When e4 is happening, and then after d takes e4, then of course the knight could be loosed here on c4. So that's why, although it's an outposted knight, it's not a fixed knight. You would love, of course, now to have your b pawn. If black would still have the b pawn here on the board, not like this on b4, on b5, pardon me. If black would have had this pawn on b5, if the knight would be further cemented with two of the pawns on c4, then it would be a perfect knight. Now, when just one pawn is protecting this, it's not so good, because Stockfish found here really a monstrous idea. Stockfish continues with rook to c1. We have king to g7. Now comes this idea e4, f6, and now finally bishop to c4. Look what Stockfish has prepared here. Really, really wild stuff. Bishop d takes c4, rook to c4. After bishop to e6, Stockfish is saying, I don't care about any material anymore. Stockfish fixes now. Here the pawn on e4. Took now one pawn, and actually after move h5 and king to f2, king to f7, Stockfish plays now knight to d2. We have bishop to c4, rook to c4. Stockfish is down the exchange. Stockfish sacrificed now the rook for the bishop and the pawn. But now look at this. Many pawns here are on dark squares, so the bishop is paralyzed here. The bishop is blocked out by its own pawn. What Stockfish is trying now to do is again play just the blockade around the square c5. Very, very wild stuff. So although black has this rook against the knight, but I'm not seeing good ways how this rook will come into the game, how this bishop is going to come into the game. The knights in this close positions are much more flexible. The knights will always find their way into the game. Maybe you have to reroute them, remove them, somehow improve the position of the knights. Maybe you have to play a couple more moves, but in these types of positions, the knights are much better, because at least they have the flexibility to change a little bit dynamics in the game. So here c5 was played by Arasan. Stockfish simply advances the pawn, keeps all of these pawns on light squares, because when the pawns are on light squares, they obviously cannot be attacked by the dark square bishop, which is now a good strategy here. Look at this, rook to c7, and now rook to c2. Look how Stockfish is playing this beautiful blockade around the square c4. It's never allowing the c4 to happen. If that happens, we'll just pick up the pawn. And although black has here a pawn majority, has here a 3 versus 2 situation on the queen side, we always evaluate the strength of the pawns by the possibility to move them. And okay, we have a pawn majority, as I said, but you cannot move the pawns, so you cannot make further progress with the pawns. That's, I think, the downside about black's position. So as I said, when you evaluate the strength of the mobility of the pawns are immobile, so that's why they're bad pawns. On the other hand, I'm seeing more, maybe even more ideas for white to push here, maybe somehow the move f4, maybe to break and enter with the move e5. I think this plan is much easier to make than black maybe wants to push the pawn on c4, because with the move b3 we can paralyze really the whole queen side, and I don't see, as I said, good chances here for black. So in the continuation we have now h4, king to e3, g5, knight to c4, this beautiful blockade idea, a bishop to h2, knight to c1, bishop to g3, and now knight to b3. Look how Stockfish is using now this tiny little squares in order to find better squares for the knights, in order to improve the knights. Now we cannot protect, of course, both of these pawns. Here in the continuation we have rook to a8. Stockfish just improves now the position of the king to f8, rook to d2. Stockfish doesn't have to rush here, rook to d1, and now after king to c2, Stockfish finally took the pawn on a4, on a5, pardon me. We have king to e8, and now king to b3. Again, Stockfish is getting closer and closer with the king also on light squares, because the light squares are obviously here vulnerable in black's camp. So really great game here by Stockfish 15. So rook to d7, rook to a1. We have now knight to c6, using now a new square in the position. Rook to c6. Here Arasan had it enough. Couldn't tolerate this annoying knight now in the position anymore. We have d takes c6, rook to d3, king to c2, attacking the rook, rook to d4, and now with the move b3, everything is compact, everything is glued together. Look at this, you don't have even this check. The knight is very powerful, and now white has here a passer on the a file, which is a very good thing because it's supported by the rook, and now with the support of the knight maybe on b6, look at this, the a8 square is supported, so we just push the pawn and have a comfortable game. Again, I'm pointing out, look at this, all of these pawns on blacks are on dark squares, so they cannot be protected in a different way. The bishop has to always protect them. It would be very good if white would have now many pawns on dark squares. Then of course the dark square bishop could attack these pawns, but now in this case, look at this, all of the pawns are on light squares. Really beautiful Karpov play here by Stockfish 15. So king to c7, rook to d1. Stockfish wants to undermine the pressure, trades off the rooks, simplifies the game. King to bishop to e5, knight to d3. The pawn is hanging. You have to play bishop to d6, f4, a beautiful move here by Stockfish 15. We have here king to d7. If you play g takes f4, then we just play knight to e1, and now you can of course play knight to f3. Both pawns would be hanging, so here Stockfish split the pawn chain here really in a beautiful way, although you lost a pawn, but the f4 pawn is weak, the f6 pawn is weak, but also the h4 pawn is weak. So really great game again by Fish. So here f4, we have said king to d7 after f takes g5, f takes g5. Actually in this position even Arasan resigned. The evaluation is +6 here, although it's a sort of typical endgame, but here White is having this extra pawn and will simply play moves like maybe knight to c1. Again, reroute the knight, including the king into the game. Look at this, the king is coming here, the knight is coming on e2. You cannot protect this pawn, so eventually White will have two passers here on the e file and on the a file, so you cannot stop both of them. So that's why here Arasan resigns. So really great game, really important positional game here by Stockfish 15. I think you can use this game as your cornerstone in order to get a better understanding of this f3 e4 setup. Although, let's go back in the beginning. You are maybe trying to get this goal f3 e4, but Stockfish never played this move. Stockfish played it later. In the later stage of the game, Stockfish realized that it should make something here on the queen side. When now b4 happened, look at this, knight to b1, knight to d2, knight to b3, cementing c5, and as I said, we're waiting. We're not allowing this knight to come on c4. In the later stage of the game, okay, black got the position on c4, managed to fix the knight on c4, but never look, black doesn't have a good control of the c4 square. Black can play on that, but we have seen with the move e4 in the later stage of the game, Stockfish undermined the beautiful outposted knight on c4 and then had dynamic play. Of course, Stockfish is playing the game differently. Stockfish sacrificed the rook here for the exchange, calculated everything in a brutal way, but I think you face these ideas many times for White's or from Black's perspective, so that's why I think this is a beautiful, instructive game, which I think you can use in order to get a better understanding of this positional lines of the Queen's Gambit Declined exchange variations. So, okay, I hope that you enjoyed this analysis. I really enjoyed this game because I'll use it myself in order to play the game like this, also from White's and from Black's perspective, because this is a position that I faced many times. If you want to see more about the Queen's Gambit Declined exchange variation and some other lines that we have studied before and some other opportunities here, like the Taraj defense, as I said, the Qc2 defense, and many more, here's the link of our whole playlist of the Queen's Gambit Declined. You can also check it out, and if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and what to say, chess is the best, of course.